Well, happy holidays, everyone. It's Christmas time, so of course that means a new Star Wars movie, because that's holiday themed, right? I remember when they did these back in May. Anyway, I went to see Star Wars Rise of Skywalker. Well, I got a lot of thoughts about it. This has been a tricky trilogy, to use some alliteration. I was thinking about how to do this review, and since the movie just came out a few days ago, really there's no way I can do this without doing spoilers. Otherwise I'd just be saying, well, the heroes went to go do this, and they had to do this because of reasons, and bad guy was here because of reasons. No, there's just no way I can do this. I tried the vague thing, and yeah, it's just gonna be like, what are you talking about? So, spoilers from this point forward. It's just the best way to do this. So let's get right into it. How was it? I think I liked it. It's a little hard to say. I've realized over the years I'm a bad judge of character initially when it comes to Star Wars films, that I get all enraptured about the whole Star Wars thing happening, the hype building up as you go to the theater, and just counting down the days and waiting and waiting and waiting. And then when I go see the movie, I love everything about it. That's my first default response every single time. After a while, I start forming a little bit more of a more balanced and realistic opinion. And I'm still kind of riding that crest between I love everything Star Wars versus let's really look at the film for what it was. I think this was the first Star Wars film that was tempered with, I didn't feel as excited for this one. And I think a lot of it is because everything has gotten so toxic since The Last Jedi came out. And I have to talk about The Force Awakens, and I have to talk about Last Jedi, and everything that leads up from those two films and what is put into this film. I really liked The Force Awakens. I thought it was a fun, feel-good nostalgia trip. It's very samey to A New Hope, but honestly you could argue that about Phantom Menace. But I had fun. It was the last great adventure of Han Solo. And again, spoiler, so if you've seen none of these movies, I'm not holding back, so just get ready. Last Jedi, I honestly didn't like as soon as I came down off my Star Wars movie high. And there were a couple reasons. I'm not one of those that's just like Star Wars, you know, Last Jedi, evil, evil, evil. I found the movie very nihilistic. I didn't like the Nothing Matters theme. I didn't like the whole subvert your expectations thing that was just, I felt was there for shock value pretty much throughout the entire film. Being part 8 in a 9-part saga, now you pull the brakes and say, no, none of this matters. All this stuff that's been building up doesn't matter, inconsequential, just subvert your expectations, here's some more shock things. Oh, it looks like it's going to go this way. No, it's not. I know people absolutely love this film and they will declare it the highest form of art, and if you don't get it, then you're not intellectually capable of understanding the genius that is this film, and I disagree with that. Because all those mysteries and all those who is this and why is this happening, all chucked out the window. Force Awakens and Last Jedi are completely different movies tonally, and they don't connect almost in any meaningful way. There were some scenes that I did like in Last Jedi. I know a lot of my viewpoint of that was influenced by the death of Carrie Fisher, and I absolutely loved Princess Leia, and I liked Carrie's real life attitude about everything, and of course that affected me. It was sad seeing Carrie in this movie and knowing this was the last time she would ever truly play Princess Leia. I liked the scene with Luke and Yoda. I just, you know, it's fun. And then I really loved the scene between Luke and Leia saying goodbye. I thought that was a beautiful scene for many different reasons. With these 3 films, the biggest points of enjoyment, it's like, okay, well, what did you like about the films? And almost all of my answers come from everything to do with old elements that I grew up with, whether it's the Millennium Falcon or return of characters or plot elements or things like that. That's the stuff I tend to gravitate to. That's not to say I don't like Rey and Finn and Poe. I think their setup in Force Awakens, they were very charismatic. You could tell they were very excited to be a part of this. They looked fun, they looked intriguing. I was all ready to see where their story went, and then they all were either overpowered or made to look like idiots in The Last Jedi, and I didn't like that. you separated them, so they didn't have that form of connection like the Han, Luke, and Leia dynamic. And at the end of the day, they didn't really solve too much. They had a very slow-moving chase for the quest of fuel, and Luke was apathetic and forced himself out of existence, literally. In terms of going into The Rise of Skywalker, you had the death of Carrie Fisher, and then you had everything Force Awakens set up completely undone for whatever Rian Johnson's reason. I know he's gone on to saying that he doesn't want to do what the fans want. Well, good job, you did. If he had done this in a completely different Star Wars film, I might have been on board for it, but it's Part 8, and you gotta wrap this thing up somehow. Rise of Skywalker tried to compensate for a lot of that. There's two ways. They digitally inserted Carrie Fisher into this movie. It was all this unused footage from Force Awakens. I guess maybe there was some contractual thing that they couldn't use anything from Last Jedi. Maybe they could have gotten some more footage. They put her in the movie, and overall, I think the effect works. If you didn't know better, you would probably think she's just having a slightly off day. I think she's blended pretty well into the movie, but then there's also... you can tell she's not really there. Well, obviously, you know she's not there. It works better than you expect, and she's a larger story element than you would expect. So I think, overall, it's not a bad thing. There's no way you could recast her. There's no way you could do a digital CG thing like Tarkin and Rogue One. It just wouldn't work. It was sad going through the Princess Leia death thing again after I've already done it 2 years prior. But I was handled respectfully and very thoughtful, and they made sure even after death, her character still had meaning, and I appreciated that. Whereas in The Force Awakens, where Chewie and Leia don't even console each other after the death of Han Solo, when Chewbacca finds out that Leia has passed, he just flat out grieves. And it's a sad scene, because at that point, he realizes that all his friends are dead. You know, Han in The Force Awakens, Luke in Last Jedi, and now Leia, and it was an emotional scene. I think a lot of what's going on with The Rise of Skywalker, it feels like a combination of two movies as one movie, and it also feels like the third part of a trilogy where you'll never get to see what happened in part 2, because that doesn't exist. While they acknowledged everything that Rian Johnson did in The Last Jedi, at the same time they walked it back, subverted it, and just basically, well, that wasn't the true story. And so they had to scramble and do a lot of patchwork in this film, which some worked, some did the best they could, and I knew going in this was not going to be an easy task for so many reasons. Obviously, Palpatine is back. They don't even play around. There's no hint. They make that very clear in the trailers. Palpatine is back. They even mention him in the opening scroll. There's no surprise to this. He's back. Why though? How though? They never really explain. So you're left with, well, how did he get here? You'll never know. I guess you'll be buying novels and comic books and everything else under the sun to find that story that maybe they'll tell in a couple of years. I don't like that approach to storytelling, especially in mainline movies. If there's little stuff behind the scenes, sure, but if you want to find out like all these great questions of what was going on behind the scenes, you know, I don't think you should have to buy a whole selection of side multimedia to get the full story that the movie should be able to tell you in the first place. I like Ian McDiarmid. He was easily the best part of the prequel trilogy, and he was fun in Return of the Jedi, and I liked him here. I guess he had this whole Secret Empire thing brewing in the background, but either Abrams or Johnson's story never even hinted that this was ever going to be a thing. I think this is something they specifically made up in light of the aftermath of The Last Jedi. It's like, alright, what do we got? The fan base is divided. What can we do? Palpatine. Everybody loves Palpatine. Ian McDiarmid is still around. So I think that was that. On one hand, I kind of liked it because it kind of did remind me of the Dark Empire storyline. I did predict that correctly, so that was cool. The elements of strike Palpatine down, his essence goes into another body. And here's the thing. So Rey, after all this time, was never a Skywalker. I called that one wrong. I might not have had the trilogy gone the way it was looking like it would have, but with all the new changes, Rey is now a Palpatine. Okay. So, sure, you know, after making such a big point in Last Jedi, she's nobody, she comes from nobody, her parents were paupers, blah, blah, blah. That's not the case. So here's what really happened. So now she's a Palpatine, and we're back into the major name power players of the galaxy. I don't know if Palpatine willed the midichlorians to make another secondary son outside of Anakin, or if he just got down and freaky with somebody. Ugh, I couldn't... Really? I don't know. That just doesn't seem right at all. So anyway, Palpatine had a son who married, had a kid, raised a granddaughter. So, Grandpa Palpatine. Sure, you know, I think this was just a way to patch a bleeding wound with the whole nothing matters thing. The first half of the film is looking for these wayfinders, the MacGuffin of the film, where they go on so many quests. I mean, there's like a jump sequence at the beginning of the movie trying to lightspeed skip, and it feels like the Star Tours ride. It really was Star Tours. This really is a Disney film, and the fact that they incorporated a Star Tours feel into it. It was kind of fun. You know, now the heroes get a chance to actually work together, unlike Last Jedi, which they should have been able to establish their camaraderie like they were building up in Force Awakens, but here we are. C-3PO gets something to do. After the original trilogy, he was basically sidelined. You know, he was sort of there, but completely irrelevant in the prequel trilogy, and the same could be said for Force Awakens and Last Jedi. Rise of Skywalker finally makes use of C-3PO, and honestly, as an old fan of C-3PO and R2-D2, I couldn't be happy. Anthony Daniels did a fine job. There were a couple things that they hinted at. I mean, the marketing was pushing pretty heavily, oh, is C-3PO gonna die? And they did that for a while. And then they kept promoting the images of C-3PO wearing Chewbacca's bandolier and having his bowcaster, and they even made an action figure of that, and I was just like, oh man, please don't try to make him cool. They basically had him carry that stuff for like all of like 2 seconds, so it didn't matter. There's a lot of hype, and I'm glad it didn't work out like I predicted. So they kept C-3PO true to character, and it was really nice to have him properly involved as a main character in the story again. R2-D2 wasn't used quite as much. A little disappointed in that. He was used the most out of all these three films, so yay for that. But I just don't know why they don't use that character that much. I know they have BB-8 and they have this new droid called Dio, which looks like a megaphone on a unicycle wheel. I thought he was okay. He didn't really stand out particularly to me. He was okay. I mean, he was an interesting, the way he moved and things like that, but I didn't find him offensive or inoffensive either way, so he was there. The character dynamic between Finn and Rey and Poe, it works when they're together. This is how the films should have been the entire time, because they have a nice chemistry and a nice dynamic, and they kind of slowed Rey down a little bit so she wasn't quite as overpowered as she was in Last Jedi. Although the whole Palpatine thing is, it was a lot, so now she's having to deal with all that. They made hints that Finn was Force sensitive. I guess they wanted to have a new range of Jedi after The Last Jedi. And then Poe wasn't quite as bumbling, and Finn wasn't quite as bumbling. They actually gave the character something to do, and they introduced two characters, Janna and Zora Bliss. They were likable. They were nice, and the fact that they were interesting characters. I would have liked to have seen them do more in the films. Rose Tico, the tragic peg warmer action figure of The Last Jedi, they pretty much nerfed her character to a featured extra in that, and I don't think that's fair. I know she got a really crappy deal out of everybody ripping on her, and to the point where she ran off social media, and I thought that was crappy. There's no reason for that. I thought Rose's biggest weakness was that she was a mechanic that didn't fix anything or modify anything or make cool weapons on the fly or sabotage or take a blaster and rewire it so it was like rapid fire or exploded like a bomb. They didn't do anything with that. I mean, unfortunately, the Rose Tico character was a badly written character, but, join the crowd on Last Jedi. A lot of characters were just badly written in that film. But rather than try to redeem her or do something of interest with her, they just kind of regulated her to an extra, and that sucks for her. I wish they had tried to make the character likable. There had to have been a way. Just give her some interesting writing. Also of note, Billy D. Williams returned as Lando Calrissian. Honestly, this is another one. Why did they not have Lando in the prior two films? Why did they not have Lando as the Codebreaker in Last Jedi? He's wonderful. He's still as charming as ever. I really enjoyed his presence on screen. He got to do some things. Thank God they didn't kill him. I would have mutinied if they'd killed him. But he was fun. I really enjoyed seeing Lando on the big screen, and why it took the third part to get him on there, I'll never know. That was an unfortunate thing, and especially after bumping off Han, they should have brought him in immediately as the Han proxy, like they were kind of doing in Empire towards the end, because if you remember the end of Empire, he's basically wearing like Han Solo's outfit. I mean, did he raid his closet? It was nice seeing Lando again. That was much needed in the inevitable facing of the death of another hero. And I think overall he really brought the attitude of the film up. Of course, Mark Hamill was back as Luke Skywalker. He did indeed die. There's no retconning that. What's funny though is they did retcon one thing. At one point Rey throws her lightsaber, she's going to throw it into the fire, and Luke, Force Ghost Luke, catches it, which I guess they can now interact with physical objects. Sure, why not? But Luke says, now why would you ever want to throw away something like that? Which I thought was hilarious, because that really was a sticking point to The Last Jedi, where he just, after all this time, 30 plus years of waiting to see Luke Skywalker in action, the first thing he does, nah, you know, my dad's lightsaber, whatever. No questions, whatever. He's just, okay, sure. There was one moment that, this was my other tearing up moment in the film. Luke raises his X-Wing out of the water, and it's a full turnaround of the Yoda scene. And I don't really consider that as much of like a rehash, but I think it shows how much Luke has progressed to the point where he can now do Yoda level mastery of the Force. And it was a beautiful full circle moment that I just, as a fan, I was just, eee! So that was a lot of fun for me. I think that was probably one of the more heartfelt moments in the series, for me at least. And surprisingly, they actually had Harrison Ford in the movie again as Han Solo. He plays basically a memory. He's not a Force ghost. I mean, there's no way Han could be a Force ghost. But he basically plays a memory, and it's very short and it's very sweet. And there's even that subversion of The Empire Strikes Back, you know, Kylo Ren reforms and goes back to full Ben Solo. And they do a little bit of that inversion thing where Han's about to be lowered to carbonite and I love you, I know. They do a really nice version of that, and it was appropriate. It was really fun to see kind of like a slight little tweak on that. I mean, there were moments that they pulled directly from Empire Strikes Back, and more so even Return of the Jedi. Some of it, I wish they hadn't done quite as much fan service, because it seemed too tonally familiar. It was the same issue as Force Awakens, and there's a lot of conversation about that. All old Star Wars fans like myself, all we want is the exact same thing over and over, and that's not true. At least from my perspective, it isn't. I'm all for brand new stories, but don't pretend that other things that happened before don't exist. Don't say that those things matter, because it's like, I understand there are new kids and new generations of Star Wars fans, and I think it's great, and I think it's wonderful that, you know, they're keeping the series alive and all these new adventures, and I hope kids have a wonderful time with this. People like me, we grew up with these movies. We've been waiting to see these answers for over 30 years. You know, I grew up watching the original Star Wars trilogy over and over and over again, and I loved these characters. I really cared about them. I wanted to see how they're doing, what their new adventures were. And to say something like that doesn't matter because I'm old or not the audience they're trying to reach, it should be for every audience. You should find ways to get new people in all the time, but, you know, there are ways to keep fans happy, the old fans. But that also doesn't mean just slap on a bunch of old nostalgia and call it a day and that's good enough. It's not good enough. We just want to see our beloved characters grow, and whoever's going to be introduced to continue the story, at least give them a chance for us to connect with them and watch and support their story. I mean, that was the whole thing about Force Awakens. I liked Rey, Finn, and Poe. That wasn't a problem. It's just they got all derpy and goofy and made bad decisions constantly through The Last Jedi. And then, the actors, bless them, I feel for them, because they're just trying to make a good movie, trying to have their part in this whole saga. And, they're acting their little hearts out in this thing. And I was able to reconnect with them. And I kind of felt sad in the sense, I'll never know what this series could have been, because Carrie Fisher died and she was supposed to be the lead legacy character in this new series, and that didn't happen. And then you have all these characters where they're building up all these things. It doesn't matter. We're going to make them all make terrible decisions that seem out of character from what they were doing before. And great, now what? Well, we're going to try to piece it together as best we could, and that's what Rise of Skywalker does. I think Daisy Ridley did a fine job. She was conveying emotion and heartache and loss of friends, and Rey wasn't the problem. It's how they wrote Rey which was the problem. A lot of these people are so quick to jump on all the flaws and issues of Star Wars. This could have been an excellent trilogy if just the second act didn't drop off and decide to do its own thing. Ultimately, with The Rise of Skywalker, I knew my sense of excitement wasn't going to be there like in previous Star Wars films. I admit to feeling a little defeated when I went to go see it. What I decided to go, instead of just being one of these people on the internet and just hate the movie because it exists, or what Rian Johnson did, blah, 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 I just wanted to use it as an opportunity to say goodbye to some old friends. I grew up with these characters. I cared about them and loved them, and really just could not get enough of seeing the further adventures of Han, Luke, Leia, Lando, Chewbacca, R2-D2, C-3PO, even the Emperor, and even some of the other secondary characters. I just wanted to see how they were doing. I knew this was going to be the last big that you're going to ever see any of these characters in live action ever again. I am grateful to having seen old friends grow old alongside me and still, well, outside of the main three, they're still doing okay. They're still having their great adventures out there. And for me, this movie was an opportunity to say goodbye, a way to say thank you to the actors for 40 years of great adventures and memories, and waiting every Christmas to go get the next big Star Wars toy under the Christmas tree. I approached it at that, and I think viewing it from that aspect, just all the people who made such happy memories in my personal childhood, just a chance to say goodbye and put that chapter in my life to rest and be content with it. I think that was the best way that I could have approached it. In that aspect, it worked for me. It's a shame though, because I did like the new actors, and I wish they had gotten more opportunity to really shine and grow and do their thing. But maybe they'll do side stories with them. Maybe I'll get to know those characters better through assorted media, or maybe they'll do some little side thing. I mean, they're bringing Kenobi back as a Disney Plus series, and The Mandalorian has introduced all new characters, and they're fantastic. They're just extra parts of the greater Star Wars universe that now I can get invested in their stories. So it's one of those things, it's like, people can like The Rise of Skywalker, and it's justifiable. And people cannot like The Rise of Skywalker, and that's justifiable too, because there's some wonderful things and there's some unfortunate things in this movie that they just simply could have never overcome. It doesn't matter who wrote it, it doesn't matter who directed it. They were just stuck with some previous decisions that they tried to sweep under the rug as best they could. They made some hard decisions. They made some fan servicing decisions trying to win back the old audience. Will they do that? Time will tell. Everyone's so salty on the internet these days. It's hard to... Oh man, I just remembered when movies like this were just fun, popcorn watchers, and you buy them on video and just watch them and make quotes and collect merchandise, and that was it. I'm okay with Rise of Skywalker. It's definitely not my favorite of the Star Wars series, but for me it's definitely better than The Last Jedi. Well, thanks so much for checking out my video. I know it's been a while since I've done my last one, but hey, it's been busy. I've been working on a lot of side personal projects. I know YouTube is changing all its features, and I'm trying to research that on how to handle that for the best. I gotta figure out what I'm gonna do with this video channel. I don't want to quit. I have no interest in quitting, but I gotta figure out what to do to protect myself in the wave of YouTube's new changes that are coming for next year. So I don't know if it'll affect me or not, but yeah, I'm not taking any chances. But thanks so much. If you like my work, please just drop me a like, hello, comment, subscribe, ring bells, you know, all the stuff that you're supposed to do for these videos. Anyway, thanks so much, and I will see you that next time. Take care.